Welcome, everyone. It is great to have you all here today. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join us on this webinar. My daughters just started online school yesterday, spent the day on Zoom. We understand the Zoom fatigue. One of my daughters at the end of the day said, well, that went okay, but now we have 179 more days of this to go. So we appreciate you taking some time to be with us today. We are going to cover three main topics. What is the What Now tool and what does it do? How do you use the tool, including various ways to use it in person, online, and so on? And 5 valuable tips for getting most out of the What Now tool. Our goal is to cover all of this in 45 minutes or less and be efficient with time. We will be responding to questions at the end of the session, but please go ahead and put questions in the Q&A and chat as we go, and we'll kind of keep those in the hopper. We are recording this and we'll make the videos available after the live session. Another reminder, if you're just coming on, we will put a link again into the chat. If you have not yet downloaded the What Now tool, we encourage you to do so and have it open during the session. You'll get the most out of it that way. So before we get started, I want to briefly let you know who we are. Shannon Hopkins, Mark Sampson, and I are co-founders and directors of RootedGood. RootedGood is a nonprofit that provides tools, training, and experiences for congregations and social entrepreneurs to help them make more good in the world. We also have Ruth Perkins Lee on the screen with us, who will be moderating the session. In addition to my role at RootedGood, I'm a Presbyterian pastor and the executive director at Press House, a campus church and apartment community at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, which is where I'm sitting today. Unfortunately, our campus is beginning to make news this week for our growing number of COVID cases. And our campus church has had to pivot over and over and over again in what we are doing with students on campus, sometimes more than once per day. So we understand the challenges that many communities are facing right now, and we're grateful for tools like What Now that help us adjust to current realities and serve our campus community. I'm going to pass it over to Mark Sampson to introduce himself, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, to make matters slightly confusing, I'm also called Mark. As a shorthand, you can just refer to me as the better one. I've recently moved to Michigan with my family this year, and as you can tell from my accent, that's been culturally non-problematic. It's been a great year, 2020. I also just thought I'd say as well, you might see some sort of red blood spots on my head. There's not a problem with your screen. To misquote a very old song by The Clash, I fought the tree and the tree won. But yeah, I reside in Michigan. On the side, I've done a bit of academic work around theology and economics, and I'm just delighted to be here as part of the RootedGood team. And I will, pass over to Shannon.
Thanks, Mark. So I'm participating tonight from London, England, but as you can tell, I do not have the British accent. I'm originally from Texas, but have lived in London for the past 16 years. Before that, in the States, I had a career in business and was a church planter with the Texas Baptist, and I'm a social entrepreneur. I'm a lay leader with the Church of England, and it's great to be here tonight for me, today for you. And Ruth, we're really excited that you're here moderating this panel with us. Ruth is a new friend and one of the early testers of the What Now tool. She's with the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship. So Ruth.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm thrilled to be here and to talk with y'all about our experience and to honestly learn a lot more from y'all about what went into creating this and how you see it being used. Like many other places in the world, March 16 was our last day in the office. The announcement was made that we were moving to remote office. And our work suddenly became consumed with how do we do what we've already planned to do. And maybe like some of y'all, we thought we'd be back in the office by now, but when it became apparent that this was going to go on for a while, we discovered that everything that we had been doing could no longer be done that way. And our question literally was, okay, so what now? And we came across this resource from a friend through word of mouth. And so our team that I'm on walked through this resource, and I cannot tell you how helpful it was for us. It really transformed us as a team and in the work that we were doing. So I will say from our experience, I didn't know y'all when we did it, and we had huge success with it. And now I'm even more excited for us to have conversation and maybe help those who haven't done it have a glimpse into how much good it can offer. So for those of you who are watching, if you have questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat feature all the way through these conversations, and we will circle back around to them at the end. All right, so let's just dive in. What is it?
Well, what is it? It's a tool. And for us, a tool really is about a process. It's a process that your team can go through. So What Now was designed with congregations in mind. It's a tool to help bring your leadership team together to make decisions. It covers everything from how do you really make sure you're aligned and together on what your mission is. It helps you discover your assets, to name your constraints. It takes you on this journey. And then it gives you an activity to say, okay, well, how do we adapt what we're already doing, or how do we design something new? As with all the tools that we develop at RootedGood and our years of experience in making tools and processes for organizations, it's collaborative, it's consensus building, and it helps teams go further faster. So does that help? That's what it is. It's a tool, and it's designed to help congregations.
Fantastic. Yeah, that gives a really good overview. Okay, so but why now?
So we created this tool over the summer, early summer, basically seeing a place where we could match the skills and competencies of RootedGood with the needs of congregations around the country. We were actually in the process of about to roll out what we're calling our Oikos Accelerator to engage congregations in conversation around the use of buildings and property for mission and financial resiliency. And if you want to know more about that, that's on our website. And we are going to be rolling a new version of that out. But we paused on that in April and May when COVID hit, and pivoted to work on developing this tool to basically address the immediate pressing issues that were facing congregations. We were seeing that congregations were in need of help to just talk through what was going on, to take the things that they had in their environment, the constraints that they were dealing with. This tool is sort of, we say, sort of theologically and content agnostic. It basically is a vessel for people to take and use their own theological traditions, their own local ordinances and restrictions that are going on related to COVID, their own size and budgets and all of who they are and the content that many of our denominations are creating. There's some excellent stuff out there to take all of those ingredients into the tool and then to actually be able to move forward with planning and figure out. So it was really a pivot on our part to address those immediate needs.
I appreciate that you pivoted and came up with a resource that helps the rest of us pivot. I think even in the act of creating it, you demonstrated how to pivot really well. So I know my experience in walking through this, but in general, what do you think that congregations and teams will get out of using this?
Yeah, so we think there's three main things that congregations and teams will get out of this tool. Firstly, and ultimately, we hope that What Now will help you make better decisions as a leadership team in a time of flux and change. Indeed, for many of us, decision making has never been harder and more frequent. So firstly, better decisions. Secondly, we think this tool will help you respond creatively and faithfully to the current situation in line with your mission and purpose. Whilst there are immense challenges going on right now, and we don't want to downplay them, these moments also inevitably present new and meaningful opportunities for us to be the church that we're called to be. And that inevitably in this moment requires creativity. And thirdly, this process will also help you build consensus, a shared understanding and sort of buy-in with others for how to move forward. And we all know that in 2020, consensus is a rare thing indeed. So better decisions, creativity, and consensus. And we guarantee that, or you get your money back. And did we mention it's a free tool? So that would be quite easy. Okay, thank you.
Nice point there. So as we used this team, as we used this resource, we found that going in, we tried to put aside the preconceived notions that we had. We went into it with an open heart and open mind. And not only were excited to see the end result, we're excited for the whole process. So before we go any further, Shannon, will you show us, like, actually, what is it?
Yeah, I was just going to say, we can talk about it until the cows come home, right? But let's go through it. So here we go. Give me just a second. I'm pulling it up. Okay, so this is the tool, and we're all going to jump in and tell you about it. So it's a downloadable tool, so you can print it out, but it's also a populatable PDF, so you can fill it out as you go. And we start with this illustration, which really is an opportunity for your team to gather around the table or the screen and to just say, where are you? Because for some people, you know, in the stormy seas of 2020, they've actually been able to stop and slow down. And for some people, they're just in the midst of riding the wave. And for some people, there's just all this conflicting opinion. And so where are you? What's going on in your world? And so it's a way for people to really articulate where they are and for you to see where your group is at for a leader. So we start with this. We've had some people that have said this has been a great part of the tool for them because it just starts the conversation. And then we give you some direction. So the first couple of pages of the tool are just ways to use the tool. And we're going to talk about that more as we go through this webinar, the different ways to use this tool or to play. We create a lot of games, so we do use the word play. Then we give you a parking lot because invariably or inevitably in these conversations, there are going to be places where it's easy to get bogged down. And we say, use the parking lot, like just park it, whatever's coming up, and say, let's come back to this or let's have another meeting. So we give you a little parking lot to use. And then the first real section is this mission and purpose. So how do you really describe and articulate your mission and your purpose? You will see that the tool has these icons for individuals and for group throughout every section of the tool. There is a section for individuals to write down what they think, and then for you to come together and agree and to make decisions together collaboratively. So again, in all of the tools that RootedGood produces, we are trying to build collaborative tools that bring consensus. And then this activity is one that we love. We use it a lot in different things that we do. The postcards from the future, it's really a grounded narrative. So you can think 5 years from now, what do you want the members of your church to be saying as they reflect on this time? And what about the wider community? And that's another distinctive of this tool. Every section focuses on both your local congregation and the members that you're serving, but also the context in which you are oriented, the wider community that you're meant to serve. And like Mark Elston said earlier, this tool is theologically neutral, agnostic. This tool is designed for you and your context, whether you're a Baptist, a Presbyterian, an evangelical, where you bring your own context, your own theology into this process. After the mission and purpose, we go into the needs section. So how do you really identify the needs that your members are having? And again, the needs of the wider community. And we break these down across different spheres. So physical, emotional, relational, practical, spiritual, and other, just there's some other needs that people are seeing. And again, this gets everyone to say, what are they seeing that people are struggling with? What are the needs? Every section of this tool has a timer as well. So we really believe that time constraints are very helpful. They increase creativity when you're forced to make a decision. Sometimes that's very difficult. Even for us and our team, we sometimes want to keep going, but to force people to play to time. And after you've mapped it, again, this is the individual, you come together and map, and I kind of vote on which ones do you agree are the top 4 priorities for your members and the top 4 priorities for the wider community. After the needs, we go into constraints. So, you know, there's a great book out called Beautiful Constraints. Constraints can be so helpful. They can make our design so much richer. So we definitely at Rooted Good see constraints as opportunity. And so we give you this whole section to talk about not just a few constraints, but constraints across many different areas, from, you know, the personnel and expertise limits and health and safety, you know, government and legal restrictions. We're at a time where that also just varies context to context, city to city, state to state right now. So what are the constraints in your own context? And again, everyone can name them because different people on your team are going to see this differently. I might see a different constraint than Mark. And so, but I can list all of them and then we can discuss them. And then we together, what are the top constraints that we're having to deal with? And how do we make it specific? I think that's another thing in COVID, it's not just about we can't gather or we can't do this, but to be really specific about our constraints. And then we move into this activity section. You know, we recognize that churches are busy places. And so you're used to doing activities, and specifically right now in the run up to Christmas, and a normal autumn would be busy, busy, busy. So what are your typical activities? How do you really just get them down? And then we're going to talk about this later. So then we wanted to say, we want to make space that when you begin to name those activities, where are they in your process? Are they something you can continue? You can continue, but they need to adapt, or you actually need to pause them. And actually making space to really say, well, actually this needs to stop for now, and realize that that might be painful for some people, but how do you make space to really name it and to grieve? At the end of each of these boards, each of these sections, you're going to see later there's a game board that you can populate, and that's important because it's not just about letting things go, it's also about redesigning and designing new things. So now you go into your resources. Congregations are such rich places. Mark Elston has a book coming out in 2021 called We're Not Broke, which will help you identify the resources in your congregation. But so we give you an activity to start that process, where you can take 5 minutes and just write down all of the equipment that you have, and you can put as many things in these bubbles as you want, and then talk about your human capital, the people resources that you have, from volunteers to special skills. What's going on? What are the assets, the resources in your congregation? And then what are the community connections that you have that you can leverage during this time? And what are the facilities that you have? And again, we've referenced our Oikos project, which is a process all about how do you use your facilities differently. And then as a group, come together and make sure that you've put at least 2 resources for each category into this section of ones that you really want to pay attention to and use to redesign your activities. And then again, on page 27, which we're getting to soon, there's a raw materials board for you to use throughout the resource. We pause here and give you a little inspiration board that, you know, this is all about, there are different ways to reimagine the rituals that we have in congregations, to reimagine worship, to reimagine how we do memorials and Bible study. And so how do you, just to kind of go, there's a lot that can be done. And that is also, if you are going to use this resource over 2 sessions, it's a good place to stop and to take a break. But then we're going to bring it all together. Here's the resources game board. So from the end of each section, you've identified the top 4 needs for your members, the top 4 needs for your wider community, your resources, and your constraints. And so that's what you've got to work with as we give you a little game to play, where you take one of the needs with some of the resources and come up with an idea. So in this board, we gave the example of, the need, a lot of people are just craving connection and community. And I know even in London, the thing that I was hearing so often is people just were missing just being in physical contact with other people, just the true community. And so, but what do you have? So lots of churches have land and they have volunteers that have time. Maybe there's people that are waiting to go back to work, lots of cars. Well, what about creating a community vegetable garden or a food delivery service, or what about adopting a neighbor? If you've got cars and phones and people, just deliver something, have a weekly phone call. What are things that you can do? Things churches do well anyway, but maybe you need to do them in a different way in this season. And with all of your ideas, to check them against your constraints. So, and we've just given a few examples there. So then we give you the blank one, so you can use this and you can print out as many copies of this sheet as you want. So, and we've been hearing of great things that churches are starting to do and ways that this helps them. And then we give you an action plan. Ideas are just a dime a dozen unless you take action. We know that. But we give you this action plan to write down the activities that you're doing, both the ones that need to be adapted that are from before and the ones that are new. And, we make you really put this in there. So is it starting or is it adapting? Who's responsible? Really naming this, using this can really help you as a leader so that you leave this meeting where people know who's responsible for what, that there's a date there's a time to start, and that if there's anything else you need to do this well, because maybe you've decided to do something and when you want to start, but you actually need to gather something else to make it happen. So really naming that in this section. And that's really the end of this tool. I'm just a little bit curious for Ruth, where their team, like how they found using the activity, the game board, the raw resources board. How did that work? Because I recognize even going through it a little bit, it can seem like you're filling out all these, you're filling out the information at the end of each section, and then you come to that board. How did you find it as a team?
Yeah, that was probably, honestly, the most powerful moment to flip to that page. As we took breaks, I went ahead and populated that last board to make sure that it lined up with what we had been saying. And when we flipped to that page, it really for us was this moment where we kind of caught our breath and stepped back and just all sat and stared at our screens and looked at it for a while. And honestly, we just let the moment sit because the conversations had been so intense. About 75% of our work was no longer possible when we started this process, because so much of our work is in person and face-to-face working with others. So to be able to see so much good and productivity and needs that we could actually address, and then constraints were listed, but they weren't the prominent ones. So coming from a mindset of we can't do this, we can't do this, we can't do this, to see, oh my gosh, like there's so much possibility, and there's so many ways that we can address this. This isn't really what you asked, but one other page that I'll point out, the other one where we stopped and caught our breath was the grieving page. for so many of us, our families and the churches serve, everything, it has been what I've called a year of rolling disappointments. That we think we've got something to look forward to, and then it would not work. And then we had something to look forward to, and everything that set off in the distance as if we can just get to this point, it'll feel okay again. And that has continued to not happen. And so just having permission to grieve the work that we couldn't do anymore for this season was so vital in us being able to then see all of the possibilities, acknowledging this, but look at this. So helpful, so very helpful. And one other small ringing endorsement, my 16-year-old wandered in one day when this was pulled up and ended up flipping all the way through because she loved the way it looked and it made a lot of sense in her head. So well done on that.